All right, get ready to dive into The 4-Hour Body. It's by Timothy Ferriss, and you might know him from The 4-Hour Workweek, which, yeah, that was a pretty big deal.
It was a huge bestseller.
But this book, this one, it's all about changing your body, and it gets a little crazy.
Oh, it definitely does. And it's not like some random guy just making stuff up. Ferriss, he was the CEO of a sports nutrition company.
Really?
Yeah, before he went all in on experimenting, like on himself, a total human guinea pig, to figure out what really, really works.
So he's not just talking, he's been in the trenches.
Exactly.
But I've also heard he can be kind of, controversial.
Oh, he definitely shake things up in the nutrition world, that's for sure.
Yeah.
But that's part of what makes him so interesting, right? He's always questioning the stuff everyone thinks is true and trying to find better ways to do things, even if they're totally out there. There's this great story about him talking to Dr. Lee Wolfer.
Oh, I think I've heard of him.
Yeah, top scientist, and he actually told Ferriss that sometimes you can make more progress if you're not part of the system, like an outsider.
But that's so cool. Like he's a hacker, but for bodies.
Exactly. So where does he even begin with this whole body transformation thing? Well, one of his core principles is this thing he calls the minimum effective dose, or MED.
VD.
Yeah, think of it like using a microwave.
Okay.
You wouldn't blast your food on high for an hour just to warm it up, right?
No way.
You just use enough heat to get it done. And he says it's the same with fitness. Most advice makes things too complicated, makes you spend hours at the gym when you could get better results with way less effort.
So less is more.
Exactly. But how do you figure out what that minimum actually is? That's where things get really interesting.
Okay, I'm listening.
Ferriss talks about the 80-20 principle, the idea that 80% of your results come from just 20% of what you do. He uses it for everything from learning languages to, you guessed it, body transformation.
Oh, I see.
It's all about finding that tiny bit of effort, like 2.5%, that gives you 95% of the results. He calls it the Archimedes lever.
So it's like finding a shortcut.
Kind of, yeah. Well, it's not about being lazy. It's about working smart. Now, I know this book can be a bit much. It's pretty dense.
Yeah, where do you even start?
Ferriss knows that, so he gives you 5 rules right at the beginning for how to use the book. Rule number 1, treat it like a buffet. You don't have to eat everything and just pick what you like.
I like that.
And rule number 2, if the science stuff gets too hard, just skip it.
That's a relief. Sometimes it's easy to get bogged down in all the details.
Exactly. But he also wants you to be skeptical. Don't just believe everything he says.
Yeah, of course.
Rule number 3, be skeptical, but don't let it stop you from trying things.
Question everything, but don't be afraid to experiment. I'd like it.
Right. And that leads to rule number 4, don't use being skeptical as a reason to do nothing.
So it's about finding that balance between thinking critically and actually taking action.
Exactly. And that takes us to one of the most controversial things he says in the book. He challenges the idea that a calorie is a calorie.
Wait, what? Isn't that like nutrition basics?
You'd think, but he brings in some really cool research, like this study with identical twins who have different bacteria, and they respond differently to the same food.
Whoa.
Yeah, so it might not be just about what you eat, but about what your body actually absorbs. He even makes it rule number 1 in the book. It's not what you put in your mouth, it's what makes it to your bloodstream.
That's a game changer. So if it's not just calories, what should we be focusing on?
Well, that leads us to rule number 2. The hormonal responses to carbohydrates are different. He really gets into this. He even talks about a study called the Kiwick and Powan study, and it showed people lost different amounts of weight on diets with the same number of calories, but with different amounts of fat, protein, and carbs.
So different foods can affect our hormones even if the calorie count is the same.
That's what he's saying, and that kind of thinking is what makes the 4-hour body so interesting. He's basically saying, hey, maybe there's a better way to do this whole diet thing.
I'm definitely intrigued. So what kind of strategies does he recommend?
Well, one of the big ones is this idea of calorie cycling, where you actually eat more calories sometimes to speed up your metabolism. He uses the example of Ed Cohen, a powerlifter who holds a world record, and Ed did this on purpose to get stronger.
That's wild. It's like the opposite of what we've always been told about dieting.
Right. It's all about understanding that our bodies are constantly changing, and sometimes switching things up can actually lead to better results.
So it's not always about deprivation and restriction.
Not at all. Ferriss is all about finding what works for you, and that might even mean having some cheat days, strategically, of course.
Okay, I see how he's changing the rules of the game here. This is way more complex than just eat less, move more.
Exactly. And we're just getting started. We haven't even gotten to the slow carb diet, his training methods, or all the crazy techniques he has for hacking sleep, stress, and more.
Okay, I am hooked. Let's keep going down this 4-hour body rabbit hole and see what else we can find. Okay, I'm ready to hear more about this low-carb diet. It's not your typical restrictive diet, right?
You got it. It's actually designed to be pretty simple and sustainable, which Ferriss says is key for sticking with it long term. You're not depriving yourself, which makes it a lot easier.
Okay, so what are the rules?
Well, rule number 3 is pretty straightforward. Don't drink calories. That means water, unsweetened tea, or coffee with just a little bit of cream.
No sugary sodas or fancy lattes. Got it. What else?
This one might surprise you. Rule number 4 is don't eat fruit. Well, at least not for 6 days a week.
Seriously.
Yeah, he makes some exceptions, like tomatoes and avocados, but fruit is mostly off the menu.
Hold on, no fruit. That seems kind of extreme. What's the thinking there?
Ferriss says that even though fruit's healthy, all that sugar can still mess with your blood sugar and make it harder to lose fat.
But what about the vitamin system?
He gets that, but he thinks you can get those from veggies without all the sugar. And here's the best part. You get one cheat day a week. Dieter's gone wild, he calls it. You can eat anything you want.
Wait, seriously. So after 6 days of no fruit and low carbs, I could just go crazy.
Exactly. It sounds weird, but the idea is that it resets your metabolism, stops those cravings, and keeps you from feeling deprived. It's a mind game that seems to work for a lot of people.
So what about the rest of the week? What can you actually eat on this low-carb diet?
He gives tons of examples, legumes like lentils and black beans, all sorts of vegetables, and proteins like chicken, fish, eggs, lean beef. It's not about starving, it's about choosing the right foods. He even has simple meal plans based on when you sleep, because not everyone's on the same schedule.
That's actually really helpful. A lot of diets just don't seem to work in real life.
Right. He even tackles stuff like eating out or traveling. Remember we talked about the Chipotle method? He explains how to order at Chipotle and stay on the diet, getting lots of protein and veggies while avoiding the carbs.
So I can stick to it even if I'm at an airport or don't have time to cook. That's pretty impressive.
And for those late night cravings, he's got something called the reverse Lent. You give up the foods you crave the most for a while to break the addiction. It's about being strategic, not just toughing it out.
So the diet's about more than just food. It's about your mindset and changing your habits long term. Does it actually work, though? Like, what kind of results are we talking about?
Ferriss makes a big claim, up to 20 pounds of fat lost in 30 days. Now, that might sound a bit crazy, but he's got stories and data to back it up.
20 pounds in a month. That's a lot. But what happens after that first month?
That's the point. This isn't a quick fix. The slow-carb diet is for losing weight and keeping it off, and not just dropping a few pounds fast. He wants people to change how they eat for good.
So it's a lifestyle change, not just a diet. Are there any other benefits besides weight loss?
He says it can improve how your body handles insulin, which is super important for managing your blood sugar. That's a big deal, especially for people who might get type 2 diabetes.
So there could be some serious health benefits, not just fitting into those smaller genes. I like that. But every diet has a downside, right? Are there any downsides to the slow-carb diet?
Well, there are some things to think about. It can be pretty restrictive, especially at first. Cutting out fruit and most carbs is hard for some people.
Yeah, especially those of us with a sweet tooth. But he does have that cheat day, right?
He does, but even with that, you have to be careful to get enough of certain nutrients, especially fiber. Ferriss suggests taking potassium, magnesium, and calcium supplements just to make sure you're not missing anything important.
That makes sense. It's about being smart and paying attention to what your body needs.
Right, it's not one size fits all. If it feels too much or you have bad side effects, it might not be the right diet for you. And as always, talking to your doctor before making big changes to your diet is always a good idea.
Okay, so we've covered what the slow-carb diet is and why it might work. But Ferriss doesn't stop there, does he? He seems really into the psychology of changing behavior. What other principles does he talk about in the book?
One of the big ones is this idea of failure-proofing what you're trying to do. He says you need to set yourself up for success by figuring out what could go wrong and stopping it before it happens. Like buying insurance. It costs a little up front, but protect you from bigger problems later.
So it's about getting rid of temptations and making sure your environment helps you reach your goals.
Exactly. He's got a ton of concrete strategies for this, like using those before pictures to motivate yourself, turning the whole process into a game, even using competition and the fear of losing to keep you going.
And he even talks about breaking those huge goals down into smaller, easier steps.
Right. It's about making it feel less overwhelming and celebrating those small wins along the way. He says consistency is key, and those little changes add up over time to create big results.
He uses a great example in the book, the story of Ramit Sethi, the personal finance guy, and his weight gain bet. How did that go again?
Sethi bet that he could put on 10 pounds of muscle in just 1 month, And to make it interesting, he told everyone about it and documented the whole thing online. He put money on it and invited people to do it with him. Talk about accountability.
It's genius. By telling everyone and making it a competition, he basically had to do it. He made it into a game with real consequences.
Totally. And it worked. He hit his goal, and the public pressure helped him stay on track. It's a perfect example of how to use those failure-proofing ideas in real life.
So it's not just willpower, it's about creating a system that helps you and makes it harder to mess up.
Right. Speaking of systems, Ferriss is all about using data and tracking to get the best results. He believes you can't improve what you don't measure.
That makes sense. But what should we be tracking? Just our weight.
It's more than that. He says weight can be misleading, especially if you're changing what your body's made of, like gaining muscle. He says to track everything: body fat percentage, sleep, how your workouts are going. He even suggests specific tools and resources to help you do this.
So it's about seeing the big picture of how you're doing, not just obsessing over the number on the scale. It's about understanding the data and using it to fine-tune your approach.
Exactly. And this brings us back to one of Ferriss's core ideas, the minimum effective dose, or MED. Remember, it's all about doing the least amount of work to get the result you want.
So how can we apply that to our own lives? It seems like it could be useful for so many things, not just diet and exercise.
You're right. It's about using your time and energy wisely, not wasting effort on things that don't really matter. It's like that microwave analogy again, just enough heat to get the job done.
Right. No need to overdo it. So whether it's our workouts, what we eat, or even how we sleep, we should be looking for that sweet spot, the minimum we can do to get the maximum results.
Exactly. And it's all about experimenting, seeing what works for you, and making adjustments along the way. Don't be afraid to ask for help either. There are tons of resources out there: books, websites, coaches, online groups. The key is to take charge of your own health and well-being.
Okay, let's get practical. How can we use this minimum effective dose idea for our diet and exercise?
For your diet, focus on a few important things, like eating protein at every meal, skipping sugary drinks, and loading up on vegetables. Don't worry about being perfect, just make those good choices most of the time.
And what about exercise?
Go for short, intense workouts that really challenge your muscles. You don't need to spend hours at the gym. He loves those quick, high-intensity bursts. Even just 20-30 minutes a few times a week can make a big difference.
And of course, we can't forget about rest and managing stress. Ferriss has a whole chapter on sleep in the book, doesn't he?
He does. He gives you a ton of tips for sleeping better, like having a regular sleep schedule, getting a relaxing bedtime routine, and avoiding caffeine and alcohol before bed.
And he talks about managing stress too.
Absolutely. He recommends things like meditation, yoga, and spending time in nature to lower stress levels.
So it's about finding what works for you to relax and unwind. It's all connected, isn't it? Sleep, stress, foods, exercise, it's all part of this bigger picture of being healthy and feeling good.
Exactly. Ferriss emphasizes that throughout the book. He's not just throwing random tips in you, he's giving you a complete approach to making your body and your life better.
This is starting to sound less like a diet book and more like a guide to hacking your body. I like it.
I think that's a great way to put it. It's about taking control, experimenting, and finding what works for you. We should acknowledge, though, that not everyone loves the 4-hour body. It has gotten some criticism over the years.
What are some of the things people have said?
Some think it's too extreme, or that it encourages unhealthy behaviors. They question whether the slow-carb diet is safe, or if some of his techniques really work.
I guess anytime someone challenges the way things are usually done, they're going to get some pushback.
For sure. It's important to remember that what works for one person might not work for everyone. And always, it's better to check with your doctor before making big changes to your diet or exercise routine.
Okay, we've covered a lot today. The slow-carb diet, failure-proofing, the minimum effective dose, and even a bit about sleep and stress. What are the main takeaways from all of this? What do we want our listeners to remember?
First, don't be afraid to question what you think you know. There's always more to learn, and what works for one person might not work for another. Second, focus on the minimum effective dose. Find the smallest amount of effort that gets you the result you want, and don't waste time on things that don't matter. Third, make it harder to fail. Figure out what could go wrong and stop it before it happens. Fourth, use data and track your progress. You can't improve what you don't measure. And finally, remember that health is a journey, not a destination. It's about finding a sustainable lifestyle that works for you and that you can enjoy.
That's a lot of good stuff. It's all about being proactive, taking control, and finding what works best for you. I love that. But before we wrap things up, let's give our listeners one final thought to chew on.
If you could change one thing about your body or how you perform in the next 30 days, what would it be?
And what would be your minimum effective dose to get there? We encourage you to keep exploring the ideas we've talked about today and see what you do achieve. So we've talked a lot about the theory behind the slow-carb diet, but I'm curious, what does it actually look like in practice? Like, what does a typical day on this diet even look like?
Well, one thing people always ask about is breakfast. Ferriss is really specific about what you should eat first thing in the morning to set yourself up for success.
Yeah, I've heard he has this kind of weird breakfast combination that he swears by.
It's true, his go-to is eggs, lentils, and spinach. Not your typical cereal and milk, right? But he has some pretty interesting reasons for choosing those foods.
It sounds a little out there, but I'm open to it. What's the science behind this unusual combo?
Well, first of all, studies have shown that eating eggs for breakfast can actually help you lose more weight than if you ate a bagel with the same number of calories.
Really? That's surprising.
It is, so it's not just about the calories, it's about what kind of food you're eating. Plus, eggs are packed with nutrients like choline, which is good for your liver and your brain. So they're not just filling, they're good for you too.
Okay, eggs make sense. What about the lentils and spinach?
Lentils are an awesome source of protein, fiber, and those essential amino acids that keep you feeling full and give you energy that lasts. And spinach, well, it's a nutritional powerhouse. It's got these compounds called phytoegdysteroids, and studies suggest those can actually help you build muscle.
So we've got protein to keep you satisfied, healthy fats for your brain, fiber for digestion, and even things that can help you build muscle. It's like a super breakfast.
I like that, super breakfast. It's definitely a combination that sets you up for success on the slow-carb diet.
All right, breakfast is covered. What are some common pitfalls people should watch out for when they try this diet?
One of the biggest mistakes is not eating enough protein. Ferriss is really big on getting at least 20 grams of protein at every meal, and even more for breakfast.
He really emphasizes that. Why is protein so important?
Well, it's essential for building and maintaining muscle, and it also plays a big role in keeping you feeling full and satisfied. If you don't get enough protein, you're more likely to feel hungry and crave those foods you're trying to avoid.
That makes sense. What other common mistakes do people make?
Skipping breakfast is another big one. Ferriss believes in eating within an hour of waking up to get your metabolism going and set the tone for the day.
So no more hitting snooze and rushing out the door without breakfast.
Exactly. He says skipping breakfast can actually make you overeat later in the day, which can really hurt your weight loss efforts.
Got it. So prioritize protein, eat breakfast, and avoid those sugary drinks. Anything else we should keep in mind?
Weigh-ins can be tricky, especially for women. Ferriss points out that women tend to retain more water right before their periods, which can make the number on the scale go up and down. He suggests weighing yourself at the same time every day, first thing in the morning, for the most accurate reading.
That's a good point. It's easy to get discouraged if the scale jumps around, but it's important to look at the overall trend, not just one weigh-in.
He also warns against overtraining, which can actually slow down your progress instead of helping it. He recommends sticking to no more than 2 or 3 short weight training workouts per week.
So it's not about punishing yourself in the gym. It's about working smarter, not harder.
Exactly. The diet itself should be doing most of the work for fat loss, not excessive exercise.
Okay, so we've got the slow-carb diet down, but what about those extra little boosts? Are there any supplements or strategies Ferriss recommends to enhance the effects?
He has a whole chapter on a supplement stack he calls PAG-G, which stands for policosanol, alpha-lipoic acid, green tea flavanols, and garlic extract.
That's a mouthful. What are the supposed benefits of this PAG-E stack?
He claims it can enhance fat loss, improve your insulin sensitivity, and reduce inflammation. It's kind of like a turbocharge for your metabolism.
Interesting. So it's not just about the diet. It's about optimizing your body's internal environment to make fat loss easier.
Exactly. And he also talks about ways to minimize fat gain when you do indulge, like timing your cheat meals strategically to minimize insulin spikes, so you can still enjoy those treats without completely derailing your progress.
Okay, so even if you slip up, there are ways to minimize the damage. That's good to know.
And he gets into the fascinating world of the microbiome, all those trillions of bacteria that live in our gut. He believes the microbiome plays a huge role in overall health and fat loss.
So it's not just about what you eat. It's also about the health of your gut.
Right. He recommends things like fermented foods and foods rich in prebiotics to promote a healthy balance of bacteria in your gut.
This has been such a fascinating deep dive into the 4-Hour Body. It's so much more than just a diet book. It's a whole system for optimizing your body and your life.
It really is. It's packed with practical tips, strategies you can actually use, and thought-provoking ideas.
So what are our final words of wisdom for our listeners who are ready to start their own 4-Hour Body journey?
Remember, it's all about experimenting, finding what works for you, and making gradual changes you can stick with. And don't be afraid to question what everyone else is doing. There's always something new to learn.
Listen to your body, talk to your doctor, and enjoy the journey. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the 4-Hour Body. We hope you found it informative and inspiring.